And so this idea of belonging is really what I'm going to begin to unpack in our time together. Belonging itself is something we are actually hardwired to need as human beings. Sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, and biologists all agree that belonging is one of the primary needs of human beings, just the same as we need food and water and shelter. Belonging is hardwired into our DNA. Belonging and our capacity and need for empathy and compassion and communication has been built into us on purpose. And the wild thing is that our main method to achieve belonging typically is trying to fit in, right? It's trying to assess a situation and see what we need to do to fit in and belong in that group. But wild enough, this is actually the absolute opposite of belonging. Brene Brown, who is an awesome author, super smart lady, read any book she writes. She's not a Christian author, but she does know the Lord. But she says this: fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. Belonging is about being seen and known and welcomed in. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite stories in the Bible. We're going to walk step by step through it, and it's a little bit of a longer one, so buckle up, ladies. You're hanging in with me for just a little bit here. But this story shows God's heart for us, because he's the one who made us with the need to belong. And he made us that way on purpose, because he made us to belong to him. And that's the deepest desire of our hearts. So we're going to talk about the story in John 4. It's often referred to as the woman at the well. In many of our Bibles, it's called Jesus Talks with a Samaritan Woman, which on the surface sounds like a super boring title. It'd be like me writing a book that says, like, Melissa ate fruit, right? Like, who wants to read that? It's the most mundane thing ever. But actually, in the context in which this story was written, this is a scandalous title, right? This would be like the Pope has breakfast with a porn star. Like, your eyes would raise up and you'd be like, what just happened, right? Because in the context in this, first of all, Jesus is talking with a woman. And if we look at the story, it's Jesus and the woman alone by a well. And in this day and age, I believe Lauren spoke about this a little bit yesterday in her talk, was that men did not speak with women in public situations. Actually, the most pious Jewish men wouldn't even speak with their own wives in public. So for Jesus to be engaging in this conversation with this woman is outside of the cultural norms and standards that you would see. Next, and probably even worse, she's a Samaritan woman. She's a foreigner, right? The Jews in Jesus' time despised the Samaritans. They were a half Jewish and half Gentile population, and so the Jews considered them religiously and ethnically half-breeds, right? It was so bad that in 128 BC, the Jews actually burnt down the Samaritan temple to Yahweh in Mount Gerizim. So there is like a huge distrust and dislike between the Jews and the Samaritans. And Jesus, in the context of this story, seeks this woman out, a Samaritan woman. He does not care about the cultural dictates and finds her anyway. We're going to pick up our story in John 4:4. It says, "Now he," meaning Jesus, "had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground of Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?' His disciples had gone into town to buy food." So Jesus knew that because of his rising prominence, he was getting notoriety and fame for his preaching and for his healing. And he knew because of his rising prominence that there was a confrontation on the horizon with the religious officials. And that confrontation would offset all of the events and the timeline to his crucifixion. and he knew it was not yet time. So he's leaving Jerusalem, and he's going to Samaria, going to Galilee, but this word "had to" is curious because it's saying he had to go through Samaria. But he didn't have to go through Samaria. There was actually a long way around that he could go that actually most Jews did go because they didn't like the Samaritans so much they would rather walk farther than deal with them, right? So this word "had" is interesting because it wasn't a geographical imperative that he had to go through Samaria. It was a shorter route, but not one he had to take. And while it was also a shorter route, it wasn't an imperative of time either. And we'll learn that a little bit later in the story, but Jesus is not in a hurry. And actually, if you read the scriptures, Jesus is never in a hurry, ever, which I don't know what that's like, but, I hear it's great. So this isn't a geographical imperative, this isn't an imperative of time, but it says he had to go, which leaves really a spiritual imperative, that it is the will of the Father that Jesus went through Samaria. And then this hour of noon is super important because noon is the heat of the day, right? It is the time when nobody is out doing anything if they don't have to. And most of the time, the women would gather water either first thing in the morning or late in the day in order to avoid this exact hour and the work and the heat that it would take to do it. And not only was this a common time for temperature reasons, but this was also the social time. It's equivalent to like the water cooler at work, right? So this is when the women are together and they're like, so-and-so's husband did this, how are the kids, how's your foot, I don't know, whatever you talk about with people, right? And so this woman here at noon is avoiding people. We're going to find out why in just a moment, but this woman here at this time is coming specifically because she's either unwelcome or uninvited to the other gatherings with more people. Our story continues. It says, the Samaritan woman said to him after he asked her for a drink, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Told you. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." I love this answer of Jesus, and I love Jada's setup to the conversation of living water earlier. Basically, Jesus is like, if you knew who was sitting in front of you, the gift of God that is me, that is sitting in front of you, if you knew who I was, you wouldn't be questioning me. You wouldn't approach me with distrust. You would ask me for what I have for you, and I would give it to you. And I return to this answer of Jesus pretty regularly, I'll be honest, ladies, because it's the same Jesus today that has answered this. And it's the same, whatever you're facing, whatever you're walking through now, this is still the same answer. If you're in the middle of something and you can't see to the other side of it, Jesus is looking at you and saying, walk in my will, and if you only knew what I had for you on the other side of what it is you're facing, you would ask me for it. If you only knew, you would ask me for it. He's so good to us. Well, the woman doesn't yet know. She doesn't quite know, but she's beginning to stir. And so she answers back, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The effect of this water that Jesus gives us, it does so much more than simply quench our thirst. It does so much more than that. It creates within the person something good, something life-giving. It creates in them a wellspring, it says, springing up to everlasting life. It doesn't just quench, it creates, which is unbelievable. And now the woman is starting to get excited. She says to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." And it's like she's responding to Jesus, if you want to make my life easier, Jesus, what you could really do is make this whole thing more convenient for me so I don't have to keep returning to this place to get water. If you want to help me, Lord, help me avoid my current situation. You ever prayed that, ladies? If you want to help me, Lord, help me avoid the consequence of my past and help me hide better. That's what she's asking. Ladies, what we need to remember is that Jesus didn't come so we could hide. He came so we could be free. He came to set us free. And so he responds to her. "Go call your husband and come back." Says, "I have no husband," she replied. And Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. In fact, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." And at the surface, this can sound cruel, right? It can sound like Jesus is just calling her out, but he's not. What he's saying to her is, I already knew these things when I got here, and I came here anyway. He's saying, I see you, and I know, and I still say you're worth it because I had to come here. And this begins a shift in this woman's heart. And because she realizes that he sees her clearly, she's beginning to see him for who he is. She continues, "Sir, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews." Do you hear his invitation in that passage? He's telling her the time is coming when you will worship. He's inviting her in, and hope is beginning to rise in her heart. Jesus continues, "Yet a time is coming and has now come when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." It's like Jesus is telling her, despite what you've heard about worship, it's not about where, it's about how. It's about how you worship. It's about worshiping in spirit and in truth. And to worship in spirit means that your heart is fixed on spiritual realities. It's not so much about places. It's not outward sacrifices. It's not your past. It's not your circumstance. It's about fixing your eyes on the author and the perfecter of our faith. It's fixing our eyes on the goal of heaven and doing everything we can to bring people with us as we get there. And to worship in truth means that we worship according to the whole counsel of God's will and God's word. It means that you come to God in truth, not in pretense, not in a display of spirituality, but you come to God with all of your junk and you lay it bare before him and you say, "Here I am. Here's all of it. You see it anyway. Here I am." Jesus calling out the sin in this woman's past is the backdrop for him inviting her to come worship in truth. She can't worship in truth if she's hiding from her own. Jesus will not heal what we won't name, ladies. He won't. And he wants to heal her, and she is finally beginning to sense that he can. It says, just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" I always thought this part was funny. I feel like this is like the least odd thing Jesus does in the Bible. I feel like the disciples are like, he's a wild card. He does what he wants, right? Like he's doing miracle after miracle. He's healing on the Sabbath and he's talking to a woman. I feel like they're like, of course he's talking to a woman, right? But the disciples come back up, and the woman is changed. There's a shift that happens. She leaves the water jar, she runs back to the town, and she says to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And they came out of the town and made their way toward him. Do you see the incredible shift that happens for this woman? She goes from hiding, she goes from avoiding, she goes from not wanting to deal with any consequences to returning to the very people she's avoiding and the very people she's hiding from, and the things that she was avoiding dealing with are the very instrument of her testimony that invites people to come see the Lord. Well, that's my reminder to pray, so there you go. Dear Jesus, we love you. Be here with us. We know you are. Amen. Right? So, but it becomes the very instrument of her testimony. And it's amazing, all because Jesus shined a light on it. All because he stopped and said, "I see you." And to be seen by the living God, you cannot walk away from that unchanged. You cannot. And then she uses her story and points people to Jesus. And we learn her invitation is effective. It says, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, "We no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world." She makes a difference in the lives of those she was avoiding at the beginning of the story. She made the most important difference you could possibly make in another person's life with the tool of her testimony. And because of her faith, the folks in Sychar, they get 2 entire days with the Son of the living God. Remember when I said Jesus wasn't in a hurry? He was not in a hurry. He stayed 2 entire days because she was brave and bold enough to carry her junk back and say, "Come meet God. Come meet God." It's amazing. And then we see not only does Jesus invite her to worship him, not only does he say what you've done or not done in your past doesn't discount you from being my daughter, not only does he give her deep belonging because he truly sees her as she is and welcomes her in, he gives her a family. Don't miss this. They said to the woman means they're having a conversation with the woman. They said to the woman, "What you said is true." They're giving her credibility where she had none. They're saying not only what you said is true, but we came and we saw it for ourselves and we now believe, which means we are all children of the same God together. He gives her a family. He gives her belonging, the deepest needs of our heart. He gives her belonging not only to him, but to one another and to her town. It is incredible, the transformation. All because Jesus stopped and said, "I see you." Which brings us back to where we began. He had to go through Samaria. Jesus had to go through Samaria because it was the Father's will that these people would be adopted into the family of God. It was about the whole group. It was about this village in Sychar and Samaria and trickling out, absolutely. But it was just as much about that one lonely woman coming to the well in the heat of the day. The gospel is now and has always been about the soul revolution of the one. Always. One life at a time. If you want to change the world, go tell the one person God is calling you to tell about his love and his Son. If you want to change the world, pray for that one person that has a burden on your heart to pray for. The gospel is the soul revolution of the one. And in case there is any doubt, ladies, you are the one to him. He loves you so much. He sees all of you, even the parts you are avoiding or hiding. He sees it. And he says, "She's the one I have to meet." He loves you and wants to meet you so badly that he said, I'm going to have a whole women's conference planned at the end of April, and I'm going to have people praying, and I'm going to have a band, and they're going to be awesome, and I'm going to have more desserts than you know what to do with, and so much soup. There's like 18 gallons of soup out there, right? He's going to say, I need to meet her so badly, I'm going to do all of this so that she can sit in a room and hear that I love her. And I'm moving every barrier so she knows that she is seen and she belongs and she is mine. I am sure of it, ladies. Because of Jesus, we are fully known. Because we are fully known and welcomed in, we get to belong. We get to belong to him, and we get to belong to each other. And this is the absolute deepest longing of our hearts. We spend so much time image managing. We spend so much time caring what people think. We spend so much time wanting only the good parts of us to show, and I'm guilty of it myself, but we forget that he sees all of us. He already knew what you did. He knows what you're gonna do. He knows what's been done to you. He knows the good and the bad and the ugly, and he looks at you and he says, she's worth dying for. I love her so much. She's worth dying for. I pray you know that today. Because of Jesus, we are fully known, but if we want to be transformed by his love, we need to take a page from the woman at the well and let him shine a light on our lives. He loves you no matter what. So let him see your hurts. Let him see your addictions, your dreams, your fears, your goals, depression, anxiety, distraction. Anything you're hiding or holding on to tighter than him, he already knows. And he says, I'm going out of my way to meet you. I see you. He wants your he wants your struggle, your thing, to be your testimony of how he showed up for you. I hope you believe for that today. You know, yesterday we had an opportunity to come before the altar and talk about the things that we were laying down and surrendering. And my heart today is that we can take another page from the woman at the well and begin to look at what we're running toward. Not just what we're setting down, but what we're moving toward. Because the woman at the well has an encounter with the Lord, and the first thing she does is hits the ground running to tell people about who he is. Because it isn't what we're leaving behind, it is who we are moving towards that matters more. And so my hope would be, as we prepare to begin to end our time in our conference together, is that God stirs in our heart that there is a work that he desires to do. And ladies, it's not actually about you. It's about him and his kingdom and his love for you that he wants you to share. We are the light of the world. We've got to shine. I'd ask you to consider this statement, this prayer. It says, Jesus, I am trusting you see me and love me right now in this moment. I'm asking you to shine a light on this area of my life. Fill in the blank. I'm willing to bet that area is going to be similar across this room, for the record. Sometimes those areas are the places where we feel most alone. I'd encourage you to share that area with somebody, and I think you'll realize, like I believe Katie just shared, you're not alone. We think our darkness and our hidden spots are unique to us. They are not. They are not. And there is strength in the community that God has built for us. John 8:12 says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Ladies, if we walk in God's will for our lives, if we keep our eyes fixed on him and we worship with our eyes fixed on the spirit reality and we worship in spirit, and we worship in truth, this is our guarantee. This is a promise. This is a take it to the bank promise. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life. But we have to let Jesus shine a light on the dark spots in order for that to happen. We have to, ladies. As we begin to wrap up our time here, I'm actually going to invite Lauren and Amy to come up here and join me. We've talked this weekend about surrender. We've talked this weekend about what it looks like to move forward, empowered with the Spirit. We've talked about these things, and every year we end with these two questions. What are you leaving behind? And what are you moving towards? In your gift bags, you got one of these guys. It's a little flashlight because you're the light of the world. Make a joyful noise, crinkle those bags. So on these, there's this little key tag. It's there for a reason. On one side, I want you to write one or two words that signify what you're planning to leave behind. And on the other side, one or two words about what you are moving towards as we end our time together here. Take a moment. And you ladies have been incredibly participatory, first of all. Oh my goodness, I love it so much. But you've been incredibly brave. You've stepped out into tough spots. Your surrender response and prayer response last night is a gift to my heart I will not forget. I went home last night just praising God for his goodness for you. So we're going to invite you to a moment of bravery again. And if you would like to share briefly, what are you leaving behind and what are you moving towards? I'm going to invite you to raise your hand, and my friend Amy is going to get some responses here